everybody's having an awesome day. Welcome back to another Savage and Six video. It's been super busy today, just trying to get everything wrapped up and then dealing with some client stuff and got a bunch of stuff going on, so that's good. Uh, I posted an article a little bit earlier on carbohydrates, right? For some of you guys, this is going to be a repeat, but for some of you guys, it's not. And I'm going to make a video. I'm going to do my best to get that done tomorrow. That actually has, I've discovered I've got a little video editing thing that'll actually show me, and it'll also show a screen picture. So what I'm going to do tomorrow is, at least my plan tomorrow, the next day at the latest, is I'm going to make a video basically walking you through how to make substitutions to your meal plan. But before I get you guys making substitutions to your meal plan, I want to talk a little bit about carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are really, really important. I know you've probably heard a lot of people say that calories in, calories out, right? And it's my personal opinion based on what I've read, and I always use my disclaimer. I mean, things change every day, but it's my personal opinion and the opinion of a lot of scientists out there that calories in are not calories out when it comes to trying to reshape your physique. And the reason for that is principally that we are creatures of hormones. We have a ton of hormones running through our body, right? Testosterone, estrogen, there's all sorts of hormones that we have, and in order to put yourself in a state where you're more anabolic, muscle building, you have to think about your hormones. Now, carbohydrates are a big part of the process. Burrito, stop. Please not now, buddy. Carbohydrates are a big part of that process, and I'm going to explain a little bit why, right? There are a few different types of carbs. However, the most prevalent are simple carbohydrates. Sorry, I've got my dog here attacking me. I've got the other dog barking at me. We've got complex and simple carbohydrates. The most basic form of carbohydrate, ironically, is glucose, and glucose essentially is sugar. When our bodies, and I'll get a little bit more into the science of why people tend to binge eat. I've got my water and my limeade today again. When people tend to binge eat, there's a reason for it, and it all boils down to hormones. Why you go out and you snack on a little bit of Chinese food, which turns into 2 chocolate bars, which turns into 5 McMuffins, and then before you know, you're sitting there crying yourself to sleep eating a tub of ice cream. At least a friend tells me. Anyway, simple carbohydrates are carbohydrates that have been broken down, principally sugar, right? And the carbohydrates that you're going to choose for your meal plans should always be complex. Complex carbohydrates, as opposed to simple carbohydrates, are a little bit more complex structures that take the body a little bit longer to break down. And because they take the body a little bit longer to break down, they're absorbed more steadily, and they don't affect your insulin. Now, your insulin levels, insulin is otherwise known as the fat storage hormone. So insulin is secreted. It tells your body to start storing carbohydrates as fats. The best thing for the human body, and the best thing for an anabolic state, and the best thing for keeping yourself in that fat cutting, muscle building state, hence anabolic, is to focus on eating complex carbohydrates. Because when you eat a simple carbohydrate, your insulin immediately spikes, right? So the carbohydrate comes in your system. It's very, very quickly. Well, the dog's peeing. Awesome. The simple carbohydrate comes into your body. It's very quickly turned into glucose. Your insulin spikes, and immediately it tells your body to start storing this stuff as glycogen, which eventually turns to fat. So that's a problem, because immediately, so our insulin level spikes and goes up, and it hits the top, and it starts to come down. And as it starts to come down, ghrelin kicks in. And ghrelin is actually the hunger hormone, and that's typically what kicks in when your insulin levels are a little bit lower. So it peaks up, it comes back down very, very quickly. Ghrelin kicks in, you're immediately hungry. And that would explain why when you have something that's really, really rich in carbohydrates, and you eat a big meal, you're relatively hungry soon thereafter, because your insulin is immediately spiked. Your body starts storing all these things. It comes back down. Ghrelin kicks back in. Incidentally, ghrelin, which is otherwise known as the hunger hormone, is also the hormone that your body secretes when you're burning fat. So it's kind of a double-edged sword because you know that when you're hungry, your body is actually in a fat-burning state. In order to avoid these big, massive insulin spikes, you've got to avoid simple carbohydrates, right? And simple carbohydrates are carbohydrates that readily convert to sugar, otherwise known as the glycemic rather. So things that are higher on the glycemic scale tend to be, of course, sugar, anything with sugar in it. It tends to be white potatoes, starchy carbohydrates, pasta, basically all the fun stuff. I'm going to be honest with you. Complex carbohydrates tend to be carbohydrates that are broken down slower, don't spike your insulin, such as oatmeal, sweet potato, fibrous carbs, and that kind of thing. So it's really important that you understand the difference between complex carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates. Because if you don't understand that difference, and I start sending you guys off to do your meal plans, you're going to be like, well, chips have carbohydrates in them, but the truth of the matter is that they're very, very simple and they're high in fat as well. So you've just got to make sure that you're choosing complex carbohydrates that aren't going to spike your insulin. It's very, very simple. I will post a list below on this video of examples of complex carbohydrates, an example of simple carbohydrates, and you guys can kind of deviate a little bit. So it's really important to keep in mind because calories in are not calories out. And when you fill yourself up on simple carbs, your body actually goes immediately into a fat storing state. So the key to staying in that state, and the key to losing weight, is not to completely eliminate carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are a great fuel source. I know a lot of people who use keto. I'm actually planning on trying keto because I've never done keto before, just for the sake of trying it, not because I am a huge fan in it. From my experience, not only with myself and with a lot of my clients, I find that men tend to run a little bit better on carbohydrates. They tend to have a little bit more energy. Keto is good for losing weight, and keto, for those who don't know, is primarily a fatty diet. However, when it comes to building muscle, it's my personal belief and kind of the way that I've tested myself, and I've tested things through clients as well, that just men tend to do a little bit better on carbohydrates as a fuel source. So we'll get into a little bit more of that a little bit later on. Tomorrow I will be posting that video on what exactly you need to do to use MyFitnessPal if you're just sick of eating the same food and you want to change. I don't recommend that you do this right away. I really recommend that you give yourself a week at least on your meal plan before you start subbing things out and subbing things in. And it's absolutely crucial that you're picking the right carbohydrates for the job. Because if you're choosing simple carbohydrates, you're spiking your insulin and you're turning your body into a fat storing state. We don't want that. We want you to burn fat and build muscle. So another thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, this is just a little friendly reminder, is when you guys are doing your reps, I know it's a higher rep program is probably not something that anybody who's done the Savage and 6 has done a lot of before. I find it's most effective for building nice, lean muscle as well as revving up your metabolism. And I find that when you're doing a lot of supersets, it's kind of weird to judge the weight until you really get in the mode of things. So the key thing with this, guys, is it's all about sustainability, right? There's no sense in getting this challenge done and tearing out your shoulder if you're using weight that is too heavy for you. It's really important. The most important thing in the world in bodybuilding, and something that I wish I had learned when I was younger, or just fitness in general, is leave your ego at the door. I've said in previous videos, I've said in previous Savage and 6s, and I maintain this today. The kid who's sitting beside you and he's 18, and I've been that kid, so I'm not judging him, who's throwing around heavy weights, is just not getting as much work done as the person who's using nice, slow, controlled reps. Slow up, squeeze, slow down. Really important that you check your ego at the door, because what I want you guys to do is get in great shape, and I want you to feel good. What I don't want you to do is throw your tendons out of joints. And I know sometimes it can be, Coco Burrito, hey guys, can you give me like 5 minutes? Just doing a little thing here. These dogs. Anyway, it's all about preservation, and as I kind of always say, and my mantra always has been, you don't, to get strong, to get really ridiculously strong, like Olympic power lifter strong, you have to lift, heavy weights. But you can still get really, really strong lifting medium weight slowly, you get better muscle contractions, you build nicer, cleaner muscle heads, and you burn more calories in the long run. So I just implore you guys that when you guys are doing this, please, please, please check your ego. You can get just as much work done doing nice, slow, controlled reps. You're less prone to injury. Your stabilizers are going to be stronger, which means that you're going to fix body imbalances and you're going to be less prone to hurting yourself. I'm 34 right now, and if I could have learned that when I was 19 years old, I would probably be in 10 times better shape, and I wouldn't have injured myself. I mean, I've done everything, guys. I've torn shoulders. I've torn my quads. You name it. I find that a higher volume is a good way to train as we tend to get a little bit older. And I'm still young. I'm 34, but at the same time, I've done a lot of damage to my body through doing stupid things. So I just implore you guys, 100%, leave the ego at the door. Form trumps weight every time. I promise you. The last thing that I wanted to talk about before I went was I want to talk about stretching and warming up. And I haven't spoken about this. I do this at the start of every challenge, and I'm trying to get through these things. So for you guys who are coming back, I apologize. It's just really important that anybody coming here hears this, right? There's two different kinds of stretching. You've got dynamic stretching and you've got static stretching. And try not to step in this pee, which the dog so gracefully blessed me with here. But an example of static stretching are those long holds, right? You're pulling and for 30 seconds, you're putting a ton of pressure on it. You're stretching over here, you're holding it for 30 seconds and you're pulling it tight. That type of stretching, what they found, can lead to an increased rate of injury, as well as a slight decrease in strength. So the best way to warm up is to do your cardio. I recommend doing what's called dynamic stretching. And dynamic stretching is more of a touching, right? You're not going down, you're not putting too much pressure on yourself. Especially in colder climates, when you go to do the static stretching right off the bat, a lot of people actually injure themselves doing their stretch if their muscles aren't warmed up properly, which is why I've built cardio into both the start and the end of your workouts, because it's almost a fail-safe for me. I know that if you're doing your cardio before you start, at least your body's warmed up, because unfortunately, not everybody is going to stretch, but I do adamantly recommend stretching. That dynamic stretching is just coming out, a touch, back, touch, back. You're reaching down, you're just touching your toes, you're coming up. You're touching your toes, you're coming up. And you don't even necessarily have to touch your toes. You just have to go down and slowly warm up the ligaments, slowly warm up the tendons. And I also recommend that you roll everything out. You're going to roll your wrists. You're going to do big arm, shoulder circles and get your joints moving. Hold your knees, rotate your ankles. Make sure that you're warming up. Make sure that you're stretching. If you don't do that, you hop into a gym, particularly if you just came out of a cold climate. I know back in Alberta, it's finally starting to warm up, which is my hometown, but I know a lot of you guys are still dealing with snow out there. So if you come in and you're cold and you don't give yourself adequate time to tear yourself up or to warm up, then there's a good chance that you're going to end up getting injured. So I did do the program today. I did the back day and triceps, and it was an amazing program. Just having James over and Lisa over for the last little while, I did what I do sometimes. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I took a diet break. I said, I'm not going to worry about what I'm eating. I'm going to go out. I'm going to enjoy. I'm going to eat some food, and I'm going to relax, and I'm not going to really pay attention to my diet. Now that we're kind of back into the thick of things, you guys are the guys who motivate me with your posts every day. I can't see you guys are nailing your diet, you're nailing your workouts, and quite frankly, if I don't keep up, you guys are going to leave me in the dust, and that's no lie because I've seen it before. So you can bet that I'm motivated. The workout today was really good. I'm going to post a couple of exercises from that workout, but I just implore you guys to stretch. I implore you guys to warm up, and I implore you guys to leave the ego at the door. Nice long contractions, slow, squeeze yourself, come out. It's really all about visualization. You really have to take the time to feel the muscle fibers. And at the end of every movement, there's often an opportunity to give a little extra squeeze. If you're doing a tricep extension, you can give it a little squeeze on the end, just a little kind of tweak with your muscles. And that little tweak and that little bit of extra work that you put into contracting your own muscles at the height of the movement is going to pay dividends in regards to the returns that you're going to get from your workout. So it's not a race. Take your time, think things through, make sure you're warming up, make sure you're doing a some cardio before you hit the weights. Make sure you're warm. It's really important. One thing that you're going to hear me preach a lot about is longevity. It doesn't matter if you guys blast through this and then by week 6, your knees are falling apart, your wrists are killing you, because then we haven't really done our job. Like, sure, you may look better, but ultimately you're walking away from this thing with injuries. And it's the old adage is really true. As you get older, don't train harder, train smarter. Make every rep count, and you don't need a ton of weight to do that. The guy who's got the slow, controlled reps over top of the guy who's throwing around the heavy weight because that's what his ego is telling him to do is gonna win every single time. You're gonna build a more balanced, you're gonna build a more functional, and you're gonna build a more aesthetic physique by doing that. So I'm gonna leave you guys with that. Feel free to keep posting questions in the group. If you have a question, I guarantee you someone else is thinking the same thing. And I'm going to work on a video. We're going to talk a little bit about MyFitnessPal. If you have any questions on carbohydrates, please post those as well. Later on, we're going to talk about fruit, and we're going to talk about carbohydrates that come from milk, lactose, and I'll kind of break everything down. But I just wanted to at least give you this to set you off on the right foot. A calorie in is not a calorie out. It's all about keeping our hormones in check to be able to produce the best results possible. You do that by eating complex carbohydrates over simple carbohydrates, which are going to ultimately control your insulin levels. And because you're controlling your insulin levels, you're going to control the amount of weight the amount of fat that you're putting on, and the amount of glycogen that you're storing. So you guys have an awesome night. I will post some more videos as well of my workout today, and I'm going to post an article. I'm going to dig one up right away on what are complex carbohydrates, what are simple carbohydrates, and then I'm going to move into a video a little bit later on about how you can actually easily I'm going to teach you to be me. I'm going to show you exactly what I did. So we'll look forward to that. You guys have an awesome night. I'm getting pretty tired. I still got some work to do. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care.